It was a peaceful morning on the lake, the kind of morning that made the world seem calm and perfect, the kind where the air smelled of pine and the sunlight touched the surface of the water like gold, rippling softly every time the breeze passed. A black man named Marcus sat on his small wooden boat, the motor gently idling, the fishing line dipping quietly into the still water. This lake was his escape, his place of peace after long days of work, his way of feeling free from the noise of the world. Birds chirped across the shoreline, dragonflies hovered over the reeds, and the reflection of the trees shimmered in the mirror-like water. For Marcus, mornings like this were sacred, a time to breathe, to think, and to forget. But that peace didn't last long. From the distant pathway near the houses came the sharp click of heels and the snapping sound of papers in someone's hand. The sound grew louder and louder until a voice cut through the air, shrill and commanding. "Excuse me. Hey, you there. You can't park that boat here." Marcus turned slowly, surprised by the tone more than the words. A woman stood on the dock in a bright pink sweater, sunglasses perched on her head, and a clipboard clutched tightly in her hand. Her lips were pressed into a thin, angry line, and her eyes darted between Marcus and his boat as if she were inspecting a crime scene. He blinked, unsure if she was talking to him. "Sorry, are you talking to me?" he asked politely. She took a few quick steps forward, her voice growing louder. "Yes, I am. You can't just leave that thing here. This dock is for residents of the Lakeside HOA community only." Marcus tilted his head slightly, keeping his tone calm. "I'm not leaving it here, just fishing a bit. I don't think I'm breaking any rules." Her face twisted into a smirk. "You don't think? Let me tell you what the rules say, sir," she said with a heavy pause on the word sir, dripping with sarcasm. "No unauthorized boats. No outsiders. This is private property." The words hung in the air like poison. A few neighbors peered out from their porches, sipping coffee, whispering quietly. They had seen her before. This was Karen, the self-declared queen of the HOA. She had fought with delivery drivers, scolded teenagers, and reported people for having non-approved mailboxes. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying not to react. "I don't mean to cause trouble," he said softly. "I've fished here many times. Nobody's ever said anything before." Karen scoffed. "Well, that's because nobody was paying attention before. But I'm here now, and I enforce the rules. You people can't just come here and do whatever you want." The phrase hit Marcus like a slap, but he didn't flinch. He just looked at her, his calm eyes reflecting the sunlight off the water. "You people?" he repeated quietly. Karen crossed her arms, realizing what she'd said but refusing to back down. "You know what I mean," she said sharply. "Look, I'll give you 5 minutes to move that boat, or I'll call the HOA board and the sheriff if I have to." Marcus glanced around. A few neighbors were still watching. Some looked embarrassed, others amused. One elderly man shook his head slightly, muttering something under his breath. Marcus stood up in his boat, the movement slow and steady. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply in a gray t-shirt and jeans. He didn't raise his voice or look angry, but there was something unshakable about the way he stood. He said in a calm tone. "I think you might be mistaken about who owns what here." Karen laughed harshly. "Oh please, don't start with that nonsense. This lake belongs to the community. We maintain it, we pay for it, and we make sure it stays clean. People like you need to follow the rules or get off the property." The silence that followed was heavy. The water rippled quietly against the side of his boat, a small rhythm against the tension in the air. Marcus looked around slowly, his gaze passing over the houses lining the shore, the manicured lawns, the shiny new decks, the perfectly trimmed hedges. He had built his life near this lake long before most of these homes even existed. He knew every curve of the shoreline, every patch of reeds, every spot where the water ran deep. But he didn't argue, not yet. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made Karen's confidence falter for a split second. "You seem sure about that," he said. "I am," she snapped back. "Now, move that thing before I make a call." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right," he said. If that's how you want it. He reached for his fishing rod, reeled in the line, and started his boat's motor. The low hum filled the silence. As he began to turn the boat away, Karen shouted again, "And don't come back unless you're a resident. We'll have your name on file." He didn't answer. He simply gave a quiet look that said more than words could. As he drifted away, the sound of her voice grew distant, swallowed by the gentle waves. Karen stood proudly on the dock, her hands on her hips, certain she had done the right thing. She turned to the neighbors watching. "See? You have to keep people like that in check," she said smugly. But the looks she got weren't the ones she expected. One woman frowned and walked back inside. The old man shook his head again, muttering, "She's gone too far this time." The rest just looked uncomfortable. Still, Karen didn't care. She believed she had one. Marcus, meanwhile, guided his boat toward the far end of the lake where the water was darker and deeper. His expression didn't show anger, only quiet thought. He stopped the boat and stared at the houses on the far shore. He remembered his grandfather's voice from years ago, telling him how this land used to belong to their family before the developments came. He thought about the paperwork still sitting in his old desk drawer, the dusty deeds and property maps. Karen didn't know it, but she had just made a mistake bigger than she could imagine. The sun rose higher, bright and burning, casting long shadows over the calm surface. From the dock, Karen stood talking to another HOA member, her voice still sharp, still proud. "I'll report this to the board today," she said. "We can't let people break the rules. This is why we have standards." The man beside her nodded nervously, clearly uncomfortable but too afraid to disagree. "Of course, Karen," he mumbled. She turned back toward the lake, watching the small boat disappear beyond the bend. "Good riddance," she said, dusting off her hands as if she had cleaned something dirty. But deep down, she felt something, a small chill that crept up her neck, the uneasy feeling that she might have provoked the wrong person. Marcus tied his boat to a small hidden dock near the tree line, stepped out, and looked back across the water. His jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes were steady. "You people," he murmured, repeating her words under his breath. "We'll see about that." He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and paused on one name, a lawyer, an old friend from his father's days. He didn't press call yet. Instead, he sat on the wooden post of the dock, letting the sunlight warm his back. He wasn't a man who sought fights, but there were lines you didn't cross. Karen had crossed one. By afternoon, word of the morning's argument had spread through the entire HOA. Some defended her, saying she was only enforcing the rules. Others said she was out of line, that the man wasn't bothering anyone. The HOA group chat buzzed with messages, gossip, and arguments. Karen loved it. She felt powerful, like the lake was her domain and she had protected it. Little did she know, the man she tried to chase away wasn't just another visitor. He was the one person who had the power to change everything about the place she thought she ruled. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and gold. The lake shimmered again, calm and endless. But under that calmness, something had shifted. Karen didn't see it yet, but this wasn't the end of a confrontation, it was the beginning of a storm. The next morning the lake was quiet again, but the peace felt different, heavier, like the water itself remembered what had happened the day before. Karen walked down the same dock wearing sunglasses and a smug smile, holding her phone in one hand and her clipboard in the other, feeling like the queen of the neighborhood. She couldn't stop talking about what she had done, telling everyone how she handled the trespasser and protected HOA property. By the time she reached the dock, 2 board members were already waiting for her. A man named Steve who always agreed with her, and a woman named Linda who just wanted to avoid conflict. "I've already sent an email to the HOA group," Karen announced proudly, tapping her phone. "We're tightening the rules on outside boaters. That man won't dare come back." Steve nodded quickly, eager to please her. "Good call, Karen. We can't have strangers using our facilities," he said. Linda hesitated, glancing toward the lake. "But what if he wasn't a stranger? He seemed calm, polite even," she murmured. Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh please, don't tell me you're defending him now. You saw how he acted. So arrogant, like he owned the place. Her words were sharp, but they carried an ironic truth she couldn't possibly know. Across the lake, Marcus stood on his small cabin porch sipping coffee, watching the same dock through binoculars. He could see Karen pointing, pacing, and acting like she was running a military base. He didn't smile this time. His face was thoughtful, almost sad. He had dealt with people like her before. Loud, controlling, certain they knew everything. He placed the binoculars down and walked inside. His small cabin was filled with old photographs and wooden furniture, simple but well kept. On one shelf sat a dusty wooden box engraved with his grandfather's initials. He opened it slowly. Inside were yellowed deeds, faded maps, and a few letters tied with a leather string. He unfolded one of the papers. It was a property record, older than any of the HOA's existence. His grandfather had purchased the entire lakeside area before the town had grown around it. Over time, the land was sold, divided, and built upon, but the water rights, the lake itself, had never been legally transferred. That small oversight meant that, on paper, the lake still belonged to Marcus's family. He ran his fingers over the signature at the bottom, feeling the rough texture of ink pressed decades ago. Grandpa always said this lake was ours, he whispered to himself. He took out his phone and made a call. "Hey, Tom, it's Marcus," he said when a deep voice answered. "Yeah, long time. I need you to check something for me, property records for Lakeside Estates, the whole area, including water rights. I think the HOA's been using something they don't own." There was silence, then a low chuckle. "You serious?" Tom said. "Completely," Marcus replied. "And I've got the original documents to prove it." As he spoke, his tone was calm but firm, a quiet fire burning beneath his words. That evening, while the HOA board met in the community hall, Karen took center stage as usual. She stood at the front, holding up her phone with the video she recorded of Marcus on the dock. "This is the kind of behavior we can't allow," she said, playing the clip as her voice echoed through the room. "He was parked illegally, ignored my warnings, and acted like he owned the lake." A few board members murmured, unsure how to respond. One elderly man in the back raised his hand. "Karen," he said softly, "did he actually do anything wrong? He was fishing, wasn't he?" Karen glared at him. "He was trespassing, Bill. He doesn't live here. That's reason enough." Another member, a younger woman, looked uneasy. "Still, maybe we should talk to him first before assuming anything," she said. Karen's patience thinned. "Talk to him? For what? To give him permission to break our rules?" she snapped. "No. We need to make an example out of this." She opened her email on the projector and displayed a draft of her report to the HOA headquarters. "See? I've already prepared a complaint and I'm asking the sheriff's office for help enforcing property boundaries." The room fell silent, not from agreement, but from exhaustion. They had seen this pattern before. Karen always found someone new to target. A dog too loud, a fence too high, a mailbox too colorful. And now, a man with a boat. Meanwhile, across the lake, Marcus sat at his desk surrounded by papers, scanning through property documents his friend Tom had sent digitally. Every line confirmed it. The lake was legally his family's private water body. The HOA might have built docks and paths around it, but they were technically using it under an expired right of access permit. Marcus leaned back, his mind spinning with quiet disbelief. "They've been enforcing rules on something they don't even own," he murmured. The irony almost made him laugh. But instead of anger, he felt determination. He wasn't looking for a fight. He wanted respect and justice. Still, he knew people like Karen wouldn't listen to reason. The next day, he decided to pay a visit to the county office to verify everything officially. He walked into the courthouse, greeted a few familiar faces, and showed the clerk his documents. After a long check, the clerk looked up, wide-eyed. "Sir, your claim's legitimate," she said. "You still hold ownership of the lake water body. That means any activities conducted there without your permission are unauthorized." Marcus nodded, thanking her. He walked out into the sunlight with a small folder in hand and a quiet smile. "Time to fix this properly," he said. Back at the lake, Karen was in full glory, leading the HOA patrol like a captain commanding a ship. She strutted along the shore, clipboard ready, reminding residents of new rules she had created overnight. She told children not to play near the dock without approval, scolded a man for hanging his wet towel too visibly, and even complained about someone's grass length. People were starting to get tired of her, but no one wanted to confront her. That evening, when Marcus's truck pulled up quietly near the dock, some neighbors peeked out of their windows again. Karen spotted him instantly and stormed forward. "You again," she shouted. "Didn't I make myself clear? You're not welcome here." Marcus stayed calm. He held a manila envelope in one hand and rested the other on the railing. "I just wanted to drop something off," he said politely. She crossed her arms. "Oh, let me guess. A complaint? You can leave it with the HOA box." Marcus nodded. "It's a notice," he said, setting the envelope down gently. "You might want to read it carefully." She snatched it up, waving it mockingly. "What is this, a fake lawsuit?" she laughed. "You're wasting your time." Marcus looked her in the eye, his expression still calm but serious. He said quietly. "You might want to check with your lawyer before laughing." Without another word, he turned and walked away, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. Karen opened the envelope with a scoff. Inside was an official copy of a property claim and a letter stating that the lake was owned by Marcus Hale under the original deed from his grandfather's estate. Her laughter stopped. Her hands froze midair as she read the seal of the county clerk and the signature at the bottom. For a moment she just stood there, stunned, her mouth slightly open. The paper trembled in her hands. What is this?" she whispered. Steve looked over her shoulder, reading quickly. "Karen," he said slowly, "this looks real." She shook her head in disbelief. "No, it can't be. He's bluffing." But deep down, she felt the first flicker of fear. The air grew quiet again, the same way it had before their first argument. The sound of distant waves filled the silence. For the first time, Karen didn't feel powerful. She felt small, standing on a dock that suddenly didn't feel like hers anymore. Marcus drove away without looking back, the reflection of the lake glittering in his rearview mirror. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just whispered to himself, "Let's see if she still wants to enforce her rules." The sun rose over the lake, bright and golden, but the air around the neighborhood was thick with unease, whispers spreading faster than wind. By now, half the community had heard about the strange letter Marcus delivered to Karen. Some said it was fake, others said it looked too real. The HOA chat was on fire, messages flying back and forth. "His lying," Karen typed furiously, "his trying to scare us." But her hands trembled as she wrote it. All night she had reread that paper again and again, trying to find something wrong with it. It had seals, signatures, even old property codes that matched the county format. She barely slept. When morning came, she put on her neat blazer, grabbed her clipboard again, and told herself she wouldn't let him win. Across the lake, Marcus was already awake. He stood outside his cabin, watching mist roll off the water. The calm morning light reflected in his eyes, but his mind was busy. He had spent the night on the phone with his lawyer friend, Tom, going over every line of the document. Everything checked out perfectly. The lake and its water rights still belonged to the Hale family. Over the years, developers had bought and sold land around it, but the lake itself had never changed hands legally. That meant the HOA's docks, fishing clubs, and patrols were all technically using private property without permission. Marcus sighed quietly, not from joy, but from frustration. "They should have just left it alone," he murmured. Later that day, he put on his jacket, grabbed the official papers, and drove to the county office. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old books. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses, greeted him with a smile. "Back again, Mr. Hale?" she asked. "I just need a certified copy of these records," he said. She took the folder, flipped through the papers, and nodded slowly. "It's all still valid." Looks like you've got yourself a unique situation here. Marcus smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. As she printed and stamped the documents, Marcus felt a weight lift off his chest. Everything was official now. When he walked out of the office, the sun hit his face, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that comes from truth. Meanwhile, back at the community hall, Karen had gathered the HOA board for an emergency meeting. The room buzzed with tension. Steve sat nervously, flipping through his notepad. Linda looked uneasy, avoiding eye contact. Karen slammed the papers on the table. "He's bluffing," she declared. "This whole ownership thing is a trick. We can't let some outsider claim our lake." Linda spoke softly. "But what if he's not bluffing? The document looked official, Karen. What if it's real?" Karen scoffed, her voice sharp like glass. "Even if it is, we'll fight it. This lake has been ours for years. We maintain it, we clean it, and we pay HOA fees for it. He can't just walk in here and take control." Steve cleared his throat carefully. "Maybe we should contact our legal department first," he said. "If the county confirms it's real, we could get in serious trouble for using the lake without rights." Karen glared at him. "Are you taking his side now?" she hissed. "No, I'm just saying, no, you're doubting me," she cut in, her voice echoing. "I have handled this HOA for years. I'm not about to let one man ruin everything." The room went silent. The tension was thick, every person in that room realizing that Karen was no longer thinking clearly. She was afraid. And afraid people make mistakes. That afternoon, Marcus returned to his cabin and sat on the porch, spreading the new certified documents on the table. The county seal shone under the sunlight. He took photos of them, then typed up a formal notice letter to the HOA, attaching proof of ownership. The letter was calm, professional, and polite, stating simply that all HOA activity on the lake, including docks, boats, and clubs, would require his written permission moving forward. He didn't threaten, didn't insult. He just stated facts. Once he sent the email, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the calm water. "That should be enough," he said softly. But by evening, the lake was anything but calm. Karen stormed down to the dock with her phone pressed to her ear, yelling, "Yes, I need the sheriff's office. There's a man claiming to own our lake." "Yes, I said our lake." Her voice carried across the water. Marcus, hearing her from his porch, couldn't help but smile. She was making it worse for herself. Moments later, a police car pulled up by the community gate. Two officers stepped out, one young and serious, the other older and calm. They followed Karen to the dock where Marcus was already waiting, holding his documents. Karen pointed at him dramatically. "That's him. He's trespassing again and making fake legal threats." The older officer raised an eyebrow. Let's take a look at what's going on first." Marcus handed over the documents without a word. The officer scanned through them carefully, then exchanged a glance with his partner. "These look official," he said finally. "County seal, signatures, all valid." Karen's mouth dropped open. No, that can't be. We own this property." The officer shook his head gently. "You own the land around the lake, but it seems the lake itself belongs to Mr. Hale's family. This document checks out." Her face turned red, her confidence cracking for the first time. "You're saying this man owns the lake," she stammered. The officer nodded. "That's what the paperwork says." The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen stared at Marcus like the ground beneath her had vanished. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He simply said, "I told you there was a mistake." She tried to argue, her voice shaky. "This isn't over. We'll call our lawyer." Marcus nodded calmly. "You should," he said. "You'll need one." The officers left soon after, leaving Karen standing alone on the dock as the sun dipped low over the horizon. The water shimmered red and gold, beautiful and quiet. But inside her, chaos brewed. The next day, an email spread through the HOA network with a subject line that made everyone freeze. "Official notice. Lake ownership transfer confirmed. It was from Marcus, attaching the official county verification. Every board member opened it, and every jaw dropped. Karen's phone exploded with calls and messages. Is this true? What's happening? Karen, did we just lose the lake? She didn't answer. She couldn't. She sat in her living room, staring at her reflection in the window, the calm water outside mocking her. All her authority, her pride, her control, it was slipping away. Marcus sat by the shore that night, watching the stars reflect on his lake. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Respect runs deeper than ownership, son. But sometimes you must remind people where the line is. Marcus nodded slowly, whispering to the quiet waves, I think it's time they learn. The next morning the lake looked calm and beautiful, but under that calmness the whole neighborhood buzzed with tension. No one spoke about anything else except the shocking email Marcus had sent. Every doorstep, every street corner, every HOA chat group was filled with whispers, questions, and panic. Karen woke up before sunrise, her head pounding from the lack of sleep, her phone flashing non-stop with messages from angry residents. Karen, what's going on? Did he really own the lake? Are we in trouble? She threw the phone on the bed and shouted, he's lying. But deep down a part of her knew the truth. The documents had looked too real, the sheriff had taken his side, and that calm confidence in Marcus's eyes still haunted her. She stormed out of her house, hair tied tightly, face set with anger, walking straight toward the dock like she owned the air around her. Clipboard clutched to her chest as if it gave her authority. When she reached the dock, her mouth fell open, for nailed to the main post was a large laminated notice stamped with the county seal. The bold letters read, Notice of Private Property Rights. Lake ownership verified under Marcus Hale. Beneath it were smaller words warning that any use of the water, dock, or shoreline for HOA purposes without written consent would be considered trespassing. Karen's heart raced as her face turned red. She tore the notice down furiously, crumpled it, and threw it into the water. But before it could sink, someone nearby shouted, Hey, that's official. It was Linda, the HOA treasurer, holding a cup of coffee and looking pale. Karen, you can't destroy legal notices, she said. Karen spun around, her voice sharp like glass. Legal? This isn't legal, it's a joke, she barked. He's bluffing. Linda shook her head slowly. The county verified it yesterday. It's in the public database now, anyone can check. Karen froze, her breath catching. What? She whispered. Linda pulled out her phone, opened the county property site, and showed her the screen. Right there under water rights and ownership it read property owner, Marcus Hale. For a few seconds, Karen just stared blankly, her whole world tilting. She turned her face away quickly, snapping, This isn't over, before marching back toward the houses. But every step she took felt heavier, slower, as if the ground itself was sinking under her pride. Later that day, Marcus arrived at the lake in his pickup truck, calm as ever, stepping out with a folder under his arm. Several neighbors watched from a distance, unsure whether to wave or hide. He walked down to the dock, hammered a second copy of the notice beside the first, and quietly taped a letter below it. All HOA activities on this lake are temporarily suspended until agreements are reviewed. His movements were slow, deliberate, respectful. He didn't shout, didn't brag. He just acted like a man taking care of his business. The sound of his hammer echoed across the water like a judge's gavel. Karen saw him from her window and felt fury twist inside her chest. She grabbed her phone, calling Steve in a panic. Get the HOA board together right now, she demanded. We're not letting him humiliate us like this. Within an hour, the small meeting hall filled with anxious residents, their voices overlapping in confusion. Is this true? Does this mean we can't fish anymore? What about our events? Karen stood at the front, trying to maintain control, waving her clipboard like a weapon. Everyone calm down, she said loudly. Yes, this man, Marcus, claims ownership of the lake, but I'm telling you this is temporary, we'll fight it in court. Steve whispered nervously, Karen, we can't fight county records. She glared at him, we'll see about that. The door creaked open suddenly and silence fell. Marcus stepped inside, holding a folder of papers, his expression calm but serious. "I thought it'd be better to talk face to face," he said, walking up to the front. Karen's jaw tightened, her eyes burning with resentment. "You have no right to be here," she hissed. "Actually, I do," he said simply. He opened the folder and laid down the official ownership certificate on the table. "This is the certified record from the county office. It confirms that my family owns this lake. The HOA has been using it for years without permission. I don't want to fight, I just want things corrected." The room went silent. A few residents looked shocked, others ashamed. Karen laughed loudly, her voice forced and nervous. "Oh, you expect us to believe this? You're trying to take something that belongs to the community." Marcus's voice remained calm. I'm not taking anything. It already belonged to my family. You just didn't know." His words hit her harder than any insult could. Her hand shook as she slammed the table. "You can't come in here and tell us what to do. This is private property." Marcus turned his head slightly and said quietly, "Yes, it is mine." The silence that followed was suffocating. A few people gasped. Even Steve sank back into his chair, whispering, "Oh my God." Karen's face turned crimson. "You're bluffing," she screamed. "You're just doing this to make me look bad." Marcus sighed softly, picking up his folder. "I don't need to make you look bad. You did that yourself." He turned and walked toward the door, his step steady, his presence filling the room like thunder without sound. As soon as he left, everyone started talking at once. "Is he serious? Karen, you told us you had everything under control. What do we do now?" Karen yelled back, "Be quiet. I'll handle it." But nobody listened. Her authority, once absolute, was cracking before her eyes. That night, as darkness fell, the dock stood quiet again. The new notice fluttered in the cold breeze, the county seal gleaming under the moonlight. Karen stood by her window watching it from a distance, her eyes full of hate and fear. "He won't win," she whispered to herself, gripping the curtain tightly. But deep inside, a small voice whispered the truth. He already had. Meanwhile, Marcus sat by his cabin window, sipping tea, looking at the same lake that now officially belonged to him. He wasn't smiling or gloating, just calm, knowing the storm he had tried to avoid was now unavoidable. "You wanted control, Karen," he said quietly to the dark water. "But control doesn't mean ownership. Tomorrow, you'll understand that difference." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint echo of the notice flapping against the dock, a sound that seemed to whisper that power had just changed hands forever. The next morning the sun rose bright over the water, but the mood across the HOA community was dark, bitter, and divided. Neighbors stood on their porches whispering, shaking their heads, and avoiding eye contact. Some were angry, some were confused, and some were quietly amused that Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had finally met her match. Marcus stepped out of his cabin early, his boots crunching against the gravel, papers tucked neatly under his arm. He had another set of official notices ready, each one addressed to the HOA board members individually, clear, polite, and firm, stating that the lake, docks, and all related property were under his ownership, and that the HOA must immediately cease all operations involving the lake until legal agreements were established. He wasn't doing this out of revenge, but justice. He had been humiliated in public, treated like an outsider, and now the truth had come to light. As he pinned a copy of the notice on the community board by the dock, several residents gathered around, whispering nervously. One older man named Bill stepped closer and said softly, "Son, I knew your grandfather. He built this place from nothing. Karen had no right to talk to you like that." Marcus smiled faintly and nodded. "I'm not angry, sir, just making things right." The man patted his shoulder, his eyes full of respect, while behind them, hidden behind a row of hedges, Karen watched with fury boiling in her chest, her face pale, her nails digging into the clipboard she now carried like a shield. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The same man she had shouted at was now standing there, calm, respected, and powerful, with everyone listening to him instead of her. She turned and stormed back toward the community center, her heels striking the pavement like hammers. "Emergency meeting," she barked to Steve over the phone. "I don't care what time it is, we're not letting him take everything from us." Within an hour the meeting room was filled again. The air thick with tension and fear, Karen stood at the front, pacing like a general before a battle. "Listen to me," she said, her voice sharp. "We cannot let one man destroy years of work. This is our lake, our community, and if he thinks he can just walk in here with some old papers and take control, he's wrong." A voice from the crowd interrupted. "But he has the documents, Karen, and the sheriff confirmed it. We saw the notice, it's official." She slammed her clipboard on the table. "No! He forged it. He has to be lying." But even as she said it, her voice wavered. The confidence that once ruled every room she entered was slipping away. Steve rubbed his forehead, whispering, "Karen, maybe we should just talk to him, reach an agreement." She shot him a glare that could cut glass. "You think I'm going to bow to him? Never." The door opened suddenly, and all heads turned. Marcus stood there again, this time holding a file folder thicker than before. He walked in slowly, his steps calm, deliberate, his expression unreadable. "I was invited," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Karen's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowed like a predator cornered. "You have no right to be here," she snapped. Marcus ignored her tone and walked to the table, setting the folder down gently. "Actually, I do," he said, opening the documents and spreading them across the table. "These are the complete ownership papers of the lake, including the historic water rights, tax receipts, and maintenance reports. You can verify every signature and stamp with the county office. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to resolve this peacefully." Karen's lips trembled, but she tried to laugh. "Peacefully? After you humiliated me in front of everyone?" Marcus's voice stayed calm, his words cutting through her anger like a knife through glass. "You humiliated yourself. I tried to reason with you that first day. You chose to shout instead." The words stung like fire. The board members sat frozen, some ashamed, others angry at Karen for dragging them into this mess. Marcus continued, "I'm willing to allow continued community access to the lake, but under one condition: you recognize my ownership formally and agree to follow the new terms of use." Karen slammed her hand on the table, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority." Marcus looked straight into her eyes and said softly, "I am the authority." The room went dead silent. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the lake breeze through the open window. Karen's face turned red with rage. "You're trying to destroy me," she hissed, stepping closer to him. "You think you can just waltz in here and take my lake, my community?" Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, his patience finally cracking for a second. "Your lake?" he said slowly. "You built nothing here. You only controlled people. My grandfather dug that dock with his own hands before any of these houses even existed. You don't own this place, you just made people believe you did." His voice echoed through the hall like thunder, calm but powerful. Karen's hands shook, her eyes wide, her lips twitching between fury and fear. The room was dead silent until Steve spoke softly. "Karen, maybe it's time to step back." She spun toward him, shouting, "Don't you dare side with him." But it was too late. The board members were done. Their trust in her had vanished. Marcus gathered his papers slowly and said, "I'll give you a week to respond to my offer. After that, all unauthorized activities on the lake will be suspended." Then he walked out without another word, his footsteps steady, echoing like a judge leaving the courtroom after a verdict. As the door closed, the board erupted into chaos, everyone talking at once, but Karen couldn't hear any of it. Her heart pounded in her ears, her pride shattered like glass. That night she sat by her window, staring at the lake glowing under the moonlight. The same lake she once bragged about managing now stood as a mirror reflecting her downfall. Across the water Marcus sat on his porch, papers stacked neatly beside him, watching the same lake in silence. He wasn't celebrating, he was thinking, because he knew people like Karen didn't give up easily. She would fight, She would twist, she would break rules. But he was ready. He had truth on his side, and this time, the lake, the same water that had once carried his grandfather's dreams, would be his shield and his justice. The following morning the sky hung low and grey over the lake as if the weather itself sensed the storm about to break. The water was calm but the air was full of tension. Every house along the shore seemed quieter than usual, blinds half drawn, people whispering behind them. Karen hadn't slept, her hair was messy, her eyes puffy, and her mind restless. She had spent the night drafting emails to lawyers, calling old contacts, and digging through HOA records hoping to find something, anything, that could prove Marcus wrong. But every document led back to the same conclusion. The lake legally belonged to him. She refused to accept it. He must have faked something, she muttered to herself, pacing across her living room. No one just owns an entire lake. Then her phone rang. It was Steve. Karen, he said nervously. Marcus just sent an official eviction notice to the fishing club. We're banned from using the dock starting today. She froze, the words hitting her like cold water. He can't evict us, she snapped. But Steve replied quietly, it's legal. The sheriff confirmed it. Karen hung up without answering, grabbed her coat, and stormed out of the house, her heels clacking against the pavement like gunshots. When she reached the dock she saw what Steve meant. Every boat with an HOA tag had a bright orange notice taped to it. The words were bold and clear. Unauthorized use of private property. Immediate removal required. Marcus was standing nearby, calm and silent, watching a small crew remove the old Lakeside HOA Fishing Club sign from the pier. Karen's blood boiled. You can't do this, she shouted, marching toward him. You're destroying this community. Marcus turned slowly, his face calm but firm. No, he said quietly. I'm fixing what was broken. She laughed harshly. Fixing? By evicting people who've lived here for years? You're nothing but a bully with papers. His expression didn't change. You called the police on me for fishing in my own water. You shouted at me in front of my neighbors, and you said you people don't belong here. I didn't come here for revenge, but I won't let disrespect go unanswered. The words hit her like a slap, because deep down she knew they were true. Behind them, several residents gathered, whispering. His right, someone muttered. She pushed him first. Karen turned toward them, yelling, Are you all really siding with him? But no one answered. One by one they turned away, unwilling to meet her eyes. Marcus nodded at a worker nearby, who began removing the HOA dock flags. This lake will remain open, Marcus said, but it will be managed fairly. No more fines, no more harassment. Anyone who wants to fish or boat can request a permit directly from me, free of charge. The crowd murmured in surprise. A few even clapped quietly. Karen stood frozen, her authority slipping through her fingers. You're humiliating me, she hissed, tears forming in her eyes. Marcus looked at her calmly. You did that to yourself, he said softly, then turned and walked back to his truck. Karen screamed after him, You'll regret this. I'll take you to court. But he didn't even look back. The sheriff's car pulled up a few minutes later. The same older officer from before stepped out, holding a clipboard. Morning, he said kindly but firmly. We're here to oversee the removal. Everything's been cleared legally. You'll have to step aside. Karen's voice cracked. You're all against me. The officer sighed. No, the law's just not on your side this time. She watched in disbelief as the fishing club sign was carried away, her dream of being the most powerful figure in the community sinking with every hammer strike. Meanwhile Marcus drove around the lake slowly, stopping to talk with neighbors who waved at him. Some shook his hand, thanking him for bringing peace back, for ending the HOA's bullying. Children played near the shore for the first time without Karen's warnings about noise violations. It was strange, Marcus thought, how quickly the lake felt alive again. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned gold, the sheriff finished his work. The fishing club was gone, the HOA restrictions removed, and new signs stood proudly by the dock. Welcome to Hale Lake, private property. Community access by permission. The name gleamed like justice itself. Karen stood far back, tears running down her face, watching everything she built crumble. "You think you've won," she whispered to herself, "but this isn't over." That night she sat at her dining table surrounded by piles of paperwork, empty coffee cups, and a bottle of wine, her hands shaking as she scrolled through old emails. "There has to be something I can use against him," she said aloud, but the screen only showed her own angry reports, her endless complaints, her messages full of arrogance and pride. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "What have I done?" Across the lake, Marcus sat on his porch looking at the glowing water under the moon, hearing the faint echo of laughter from families fishing by the shore. For the first time in years, the lake was peaceful again. He closed his eyes and remembered his grandfather's words, "Son, one day this lake will remind people that peace belongs to those who earn it." He smiled softly, whispering, "You were right, Grandpa." But deep inside he knew this peace might not last forever, because people like Karen never stop trying to control what isn't theirs. Still he was ready, not just to defend his lake, but to protect the respect his family had built for generations. The lake had waited decades for justice, and now, at last, it had found its voice. Weeks passed and the once divided neighborhood slowly began to heal. The air around the lake was different now, lighter, warmer, peaceful. Children laughed as they played near the shore. Families fished on weekends without fear of Karen's clipboard or her endless rules. And for the first time in years, people felt free. Marcus had kept his promise. He didn't shut anyone out. Instead he welcomed them, allowing residents to use the lake with simple respect and honesty. He personally met with every family, explaining how they could enjoy the lake safely. Slowly, trust replaced tension, and smiles replaced whispers. But in one corner of the neighborhood, a single house remained silent and dark. Karen's curtains stayed closed, her mailbox overflowed, and her perfect flower garden was dying. She hadn't shown her face since the day the fishing club sign came down. Rumors spread that she had tried to contact lawyers, but every attorney told her the same thing. The case was airtight. Marcus's ownership was legally unshakable. Every time she looked at the lake, she saw her defeat reflected in the water. One afternoon, she finally walked outside, her once proud walk replaced by slow, tired steps. Her neighbors watched quietly as she crossed the street toward Marcus's cabin. He was sitting on the porch, reading, when he saw her approach. He didn't look angry, just cautious, waiting for her to speak first. "I came to talk," she said, her voice small, a shadow of the arrogance she once carried. Marcus nodded silently, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated but sat down on the wooden step beside him. For a long moment, they both looked at the lake in silence, the water shimmering under the soft light of the evening. Finally, she spoke again. I wanted to say I was wrong," she said quietly. "I didn't know. I thought you were just another outsider trying to take what we built." Marcus looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "It's not about ownership anymore, Karen. It's about respect. You treated me like I didn't belong, even when all I did was sit quietly and fish. That wasn't about rules. That was about control." Karen's eyes dropped, shame flickering across her face. "I thought I was doing my job," she said weakly. "You thought being in charge made you better than others," Marcus corrected softly. "It never did." She swallowed hard, tears forming. "I lost everything because of this," she whispered. "No," Marcus said gently, "you lost what you never really owned." The words stung, but there was no hate in them, only truth. They sat in silence again, watching the waves roll softly against the dock. Karen took a deep breath. "Are you going to kick me out too?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No, Karen. I'm not you." Her lips trembled as she nodded slowly, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. Marcus didn't answer, but his silence wasn't cruel, it was forgiving. When she stood up to leave, she looked out across the lake one last time and said softly, "It really is beautiful. I just never saw it until now." Then she turned and walked away, her figure shrinking in the distance, finally understanding that control and respect were never the same thing. Days later, a moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. She sold it quietly, no drama, no speeches, no goodbye emails. When the last box was loaded, she took one final look at the lake from her driveway and smiled faintly before driving away. The neighborhood didn't celebrate her leaving. They just let the quiet settle in. Life went on. The lake became a symbol of peace and unity instead of division. The HOA board dissolved, replaced by a simple community committee that worked under Marcus's guidance. He never demanded authority. People gave it to him willingly because they trusted him. He restored the dock, repainted the benches, and even built a small public pier for kids to fish from. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and gold, Marcus stood on the dock with a group of children laughing around him, the same place where Karen had once screamed at him to leave. The irony wasn't lost on him. He smiled softly, watching the water ripple with color, whispering, "You finally belong to the right people now." The lake, now named Hale Lake in honor of his grandfather, had become more than just property. It was a legacy of patience, dignity, and justice. Every person in the community respected it, cared for it, and taught their children its story. About the man who stayed calm when wronged, and who reclaimed not just land but respect. As night fell and the lights around the lake flickered on, Marcus sat on his porch, the cool breeze brushing against his face, carrying the faint sound of laughter across the water. He thought of his grandfather again, of the stories told by firelight about standing tall in the face of arrogance. The stars reflected on the still surface of the lake, and for the first time, Marcus felt that true peace wasn't about revenge or victory, it was about balance. He looked at the water one last time before heading inside, whispering, "We're home now," as the gentle ripples carried his words across Hale Lake, the same lake that had seen pride rise, arrogance fall, and justice finally find its voice.